Hello, my name is Gisela and welcome to the very first episode of the KnotWeaveStitch podcast. Throughout these podcast episodes, we will be exploring the world of the fibre arts, from weaving to needle felting and everything in between. KnotWeaveStitch is perfect for beginner crafters looking for tips, tricks and ideas, and for fellow fibre artists looking for a cosy chat about what we love to do. Hopefully, in future episodes, we will set up conversations with other fibre artists looking to talk about their knowledge. So for the first episode, I thought we could talk a little bit about my background experience, what I did when I was younger and how I got into arts and crafts. So currently, I'm a UK-based crafter, artist. I am based in the southeast of England. I currently live with my husband and my dog called Chunky. And we've actually just recently moved into our house. So one of the big main reasons that we moved, it was so that I could have my own crafting studio, crafting office, because before we lived in a one-bedroom flat. So I was pretty much working in the living room on a desk, nowhere near enough space, and when I was teaching I had to kick my husband out of the room. So I found that I was struggling for not only space to be able to teach crafts, but also storage was becoming a bit of an issue. Pretty much maximised all the storage that we could have in a small flat. So that was one of the big goals, that I was able to find a house that we could have some room where I could literally just lock myself away. I could teach my workshops and also do a bit of crafting in peace, where I could leave everything out a complete mess. As I'm sure some of you will understand, trying to pack away after you do your lovely arts and crafts is always a bit of a nightmare. I like to just leave mine out and come back to it at any point. So having a space where I could just do that, it wasn't going to be right in the way of everything, and having a little bit of space for peace and quiet was great as well. So that is what I have now. But going way back to how it all started, I have a very obscure way of how I got to where I am today. So basically, in terms of arts and crafts, when I was younger, I'm from a house where when we were younger, we had a room dedicated to arts and crafts, which was fantastic. My mum very much showed us lots of different crafts. We had so many different shelves of all sorts of different things. And then even when I was at school, it was something that I loved the most. I loved arts and crafts. I really struggled with things like maths. My brain would just completely shut down. So anything like that, I would get quite upset about trying to figure out. So I was very much more creative, craft orientated. I've really excelled at arts and crafts back at school. So I remember in particular, there was one craft that really stood out to me. And I think that's really what got me going even more with art and craft. So I think it was back in year 3, there was a quilling club. And I remember that we had to make a Christmas card with a Father Christmas out of quilling. And I was just in awe of what you could do with just strips of paper. It absolutely blew my mind. So I made this card, and I think my mum still has it to this day. It's this gorgeous little Santa Little Father Christmas with like glitter glue all over it. I absolutely loved it. And I really do think from then that just encouraged me to want to do arts and crafts even more. Even though I did arts and crafts before that, I think that was really what set it in motion. And it's something that I really do remember quite vividly, this lovely club to do quilling. And I think it's one of the first crafts that I wanted. So I wanted the quilling tools and the quilling strips. So I begged my mum for those. So it's one of those things that I think really set me on the path with arts and crafts then, that creative side. So fast forward to secondary school. Still loved arts and crafts, very much creative. So I took art for GCSEs and A-levels, and I decided to do fine art. But with GCSEs and A-levels, particularly with A-levels, I really began to struggle. I found it was actually quite restrictive. So unless you were absolutely fantastic at sketching or painting, there wasn't very many other options for you. And I found that other art forms were kind of frowned upon, actually. So, I I can sketch, I can paint, not to a great level though, so I had the skills for it, but nowhere near good enough. And to be honest, I really struggled with that. I'm not a fine artist at all. I'm not very skilled with absolutely fantastic, beautiful paintings, portraits, anything like that. I really cannot do. So unfortunately, I think that was the main focus when you took fine art for GCSE and then in particular A-levels. If you weren't a fantastic artist in terms of painting and sketching, particularly if you want to do something quite realistic, then, I think they kind of look down a little bit on you and your skills. So I was getting quite frustrated with that because I very much prefer to really work with my hands. I like trying different mediums. I wanted to do things like decoupage or paper mache or mosaics, whatever it may be. I really wanted to get involved with different textiles because I don't think I was very good at the very fine, exact details. As much as I wanted to do those beautiful paintings, I liked very smooth paintings, a bit like Georgia O'Keeffe, the flowers. Absolutely adored them, but I very much struggled to be very exact, very perfect, very smooth with my paintings. And I remember we did a course on abstract, and I remember we had to do these drip paintings, and at that point I I'd nearly given up, so I was kind of just chucking paint on, and according to my teachers it was absolutely fantastic, beautiful work. I just remembered I'd thrown that paint onto the canvas, didn't really put any thought, time or effort into there, and then I was being praised for that. But then when it came to me spending hours upon hours trying to do really fine, delicate painting, that wasn't good enough. So I really struggled with that idea that they were pushing for me to be more abstract. And I didn't want to do abstract. It was not something I was particularly interested in. I wanted to do lovely, smooth painting, but I felt like I didn't have the skills for that. So I was kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place with it. So much so that I actually then dropped fine art for my A-levels because I completely lost the passion. It was absolutely killed, I think. And it was such a shame because I'd absolutely loved art all the way up until about GCSEs and A-levels. And then I just wanted to really give up on it. So after I dropped it, at the time I was actually really enjoying media studies. I absolutely adored film and TV. I loved analysing it. I just absolutely loved what people did in terms of cinematography, directing, costume, production, everything behind it. The idea that absolutely everything you see on screen, there was always a reason for why it's there. I really found that fascinating. So I really excelled in media studies, particularly for my A-levels. And then that's kind of what pushed me, I think, to go more down that direction. So for university, I knew I wanted to do media studies. I didn't know exactly where I wanted to go with it. I didn't know what career I wanted to do at the time. So I actually decided on a gap year just to get my mind set and really know what I wanted to do. So after I took my gap year, I worked a job and everything like that through the gap year. But when I then went to university, I went to the University of Sussex and I did media studies there. And I loved the different parts of the courses, especially script writing. That was one of the standouts for me. Absolutely loved to be able to learn how to do script writing. So it just pushed me more into absolutely enjoying media, TV and film in particular. I really, really love to do. However, with university life, it was not for me. I'm very much an introvert. I didn't really like to talk to people, pretty much stayed in my room or was at my job at the time. So I found that part very, very difficult. It really wasn't for me. As much as I liked my course, university life wasn't for me. Plus, at the time, we had a lot of strikes going on. So even when there were lovely lessons, a lot of the time they were cancelled because the teachers were on strike. So I found that quite frustrating at the time. So for the next part, I can't remember the exact order of timeline of events, but I think I was coming to the final year of media studies at the University of Sussex. And I think I wanted to go more into the environmental side of things. I really loved nature and animals, anything like that. I really, really loved, because at the time I was very much watching a lot of David Attenborough documentary series. So I really wanted to be able to get into something where I could help the environment, help the world. So I started looking into environmental courses. So I started looking around, and then I found the Open University, and on there it was actually far cheaper than going to a normal university. And also for me, the plus side was that I didn't need to go to university itself. I could do this study from home, which really appealed to me. I didn't want the university life. I just wanted the experience of learning. So I had a look at the Open University and saw that they did several different environmental courses. So I looked at their courses, and I think it was natural science under the biology pathway. And that really appealed to me. So I applied for that and got onto the course there. And you can, with the Open University, you can decide how long you want to study for, because a lot of people obviously do it around their full-time job, or a lot of older students like to do it. So, looking after kids and stuff like that. So you do get the option to very much draw it out further. It didn't need to be a standard undergraduate 3 years course. You could extend it out for several more years. And by doing so, you're more likely to get a better grade when you are extending it out. So there's not so much pressure. So you could decide how much you really want to do, how many modules, and how many credits basically for the amount of years. So I wanted to just get on with it. I wanted to get going, even though at the time I had my job and I was finishing off the last year of Sussex University. But I wanted to get going with it. I wanted to just get through it and get the degree and learn as quickly as possible. So I did make the mad choice to do it as a standard 3-year one. So the most probably work intensive course that you could do. So with that one, much higher kind of workload in a shorter space of time, rather than dragging it out for several years, which sometimes I regret. I sometimes think that I should have maybe dragged it out a little bit longer, but then for what I'll explain in a few minutes' time, it was probably a good idea that I did actually do it a little bit quicker. So I was absolutely loving studying with the Open University. It was absolutely fantastic to be able to do it all online. I got the textbooks and everything, I could study. I remember I was on holiday and I took my textbooks with me. Something catered to more of what I enjoyed rather than being on the social side of things. I very much just wanted the knowledge. While I was there, I was trying to think, what do I do as a career going on from this? I wanted to now potentially do something with nature, the environment, animals, because I was doing this course. I absolutely loved David Attenborough documentaries. I really didn't like the way that the world was going in terms of, pollution, climate change, everything like that. I wanted to make a difference. I didn't just want to do a normal job. I wanted to make a difference somehow in the world. So I was really lost at where I was going to go after this. I had no clue what career path. Everything that I looked at seemed very specific, things like animal husbandry. You had to do another course on top of that, more degrees for all sorts of different career pathways. So I was really, really quite lost. I didn't know what to do with everything I basically learned. So probably one of the big days in my life that kind of really changed the direction of my life was when I went to the O2, so the O2 Arena. And I remember going to the O2 because Empire magazine had a special event going on. So I think it was a day or a couple of days where they were doing special screenings, Q&As, all sorts of things at the cinema within the O2. So I was attending that. So I think we went to a slime along for Ghostbusters, where we had to get dressed up in suits and everything. And in the cinema, they were literally chucking slime all over us. There was Q&As with people from Game of Thrones. Lots of really interesting events there. So while that was going on the day, they also had little stands, little pop-up stands, just on the outside of the cinema in the O2. And I remember going up to one of them, and it was actually for the National Film and Television School. They set up a stand there and they were advertising some of their courses. So if you haven't heard of the National Film and Television School, it is one of the best schools in the world. They are based in Beaconsfield, and if you want to get into the film industry, that is one of the places you need to go. So they do lots of different courses from directing, editing, sound, all sorts of different things like that. So they had a stand at the O2 there that day. And I remember just happening to come across a leaflet, and the leaflet said that there was a new course starting, and it's for directing and producing science and natural history documentaries. So with that, it was like a light bulb moment. I had spent years trying to figure out where I wanted to go. You know, at that age, you get so many people asking you, what do you want to do with your life? What career do you want to do? And a lot of the time, you don't have a clue. So for me, it all just came together. I had that media background where I'd done media studies. I was now on a course where I was learning biology and natural sciences, so getting that kind of environmental aspect of it. I absolutely loved any wildlife documentary, so I knew this is something that I desperately needed and wanted to do. So it's a moment in my life that I remember so clearly. So it was then logistical. How was I going to get into it? What did I need to do to apply to it? How was I going to fund myself? Because that was expensive. It wasn't a free course. So for that course, it was a 2-year master's degree. So obviously in the process, you had to do an application and an interview. And I think they also held an open day. So I went to the school and I had a look around at the facilities and also sat down on a talk with the head of that department and had a kind of look into what they were doing. So I knew from that day that I wanted to do this course, but logistically looking at my university degrees, what I was doing at the time, I wasn't going to be able to finish the Open University before that course. So I think I had to finish that final year before that course there. So I didn't apply for the first year of it. I actually applied for the second year because I wanted that time to be able to finish my university course and then I could just throw myself completely into this master's. So I think we went to the open day before the application. It may be the other way around, but we went to the open day at the National Film and Television School and I was just awestruck. It is an absolutely incredible place. You would completely miss it if you went past because it's just a little area in Beaconsfield. You wouldn't think that somewhere so kind of significant there in terms of, you know, film and television would be in a place like that. But it was absolutely incredible. So I then filled out the application. So the standard kind of questions of background of me, why I wanted to do that course, things like that. And then after that, there was also an interview process. So at the time, the interview was scheduled when I was already planning to go away. And unfortunately, I'd spent a lot of money on this holiday with the money that I'd earned from work. And I couldn't just cancel it. I wouldn't have got my money back. So I still wanted to go on the holiday and I still wanted to do the interview. So I was in a little bit of a stuck position there. So I begged and asked if it was possible if I could do the interview online. I think it was over Skype at the time because I wouldn't be able to go actually in person. Thankfully, they said yes. So I remember being in the Dominican Republic. It was very early in the morning because of the time difference. So I got myself all set up. I brought myself a little blouse that I was wearing in the hotel room, trying to get myself all set up for this interview. I had the interview with the head of department. I thought it went okay, but my mind likes to run and run. So I was obviously quite worried and hoping that I got into this course. And while I was still on holiday, I did hear back from them and they said that I had been accepted onto the course. I think there's usually between 8 and 12 people on a course. So for me, I was absolutely amazed that one of the top film schools in the world with a class of, you know, maximum of 12 people, that I was one of them. So it was definitely a moment where I popped the champagne, celebrated. It was absolutely fantastic. But then reality hit, and I had to try and figure out a way that I was going to be able to support myself through these 2 years, because it wasn't a cheap course and I didn't really have the funding. I still had a job to support me at the time. I think I was still doing actually 2 jobs at the time, but I needed some financial help. I wasn't going to be able to afford it otherwise. So I applied for a scholarship in the hopes that I would get something to at least lower the burden a little bit on myself. Otherwise, I don't think I would have been able to go to film school. So I did an application for that, went through all of that process. And then again, I think it was a few weeks or a few months later, I finally found out that I did receive a scholarship. So it was the RSPB scholarship, which was amazing and really, really helped me with my finances there. So I had basically half a scholarship, and then the other half I was just financing myself through film school. So after I finished my degree with the University of Sussex, my media studies degree, I then finished my natural science biology pathway degree with the Open University. And then I went on to my master's degree. So I was just the constant student at that point in my life. I would have loved to have done many more courses, but I think my mum would have kicked me out if I stayed to do any more. So I then spent the next 2 incredible years at the National Film and Television School doing directing and producing science and natural history documentaries, and I will never forget the experience. The school was incredible. There were cinemas built in within the school, all the different departments. You got to work with the different departments there. So because of the 2 years, you basically had 2 main films that you had to create. So the first year was shorter. So you basically had to make a proposal on what kind of documentary you wanted to make. Then it went through a process where you had to basically pitch it to the head of department and some other people, and then you'd get the green light to do it, or you would have to come back again to think of maybe a different proposal to do. So for the first year, I wanted to look at things like brine shrimp and triops. So brine shrimp, you might know them as sea monkeys. And I wanted to basically learn them because it's really amazing the kind of environments that they can live and survive in. So I researched and I found out that there were lagoons in southeastern Spain where they lived, particularly areas where there are flamingos. Flamingos eat these brine shrimp, and a lot of the time that's what then discolours them. That kind of pink in the brine shrimp then will discolour the flamingo feathers. So I wanted to really focus on how brine shrimp and triops, all of these kind of creatures were able to survive in different environments. So they can live in very, very salty lagoons. They can live in puddles that basically dry up over the summer, and I was absolutely fascinated by it. So that's the film that I went out to do. So I flew to Spain, filmed that small documentary out on these kind of like salt plains and a salt lagoon there, which was incredible. I went to some other lagoons nearby where they had the flamingos just walking around. I then very much loved macro filmmaking, so very close up, small details. So the shots that you might see on wildlife documentaries where you're very up close in detail of insects, that's the sort of thing that really, really interested me. So I then made little sets at home, little tanks that I got for my brine shrimp and for my triops, and I filmed lovely up close shots of that. And then I brought that together for a documentary, working with an editor as well on that and a few other people. And then in my second year, it was a much bigger project. You basically got given a budget for each of these things and you had to stick within the budget, but you could go anywhere that you wanted. You still had to pitch the film and you still had to get green lit. You also had to do the health and safety behind it. So all of that, there was a lot of work that went into it. And I wanted to focus on sound pollution. So I really wanted to see how sound pollution was basically affecting animals. So I went around the UK and I wanted to film animals that you didn't really think or maybe expect that was affected, or maybe things that you didn't know was affecting different animals. So I looked at how sound was affecting dolphins. So things like boats kind of commercial cargo, how potentially wind turbines out in the sea could affect them. I also looked at seals. I never even knew that we had lots of seal colonies in the UK, so I went to Norfolk and I filmed there to kind of research and study how they were potentially being affected by sound as well. I then looked at other things, so how birds, when they call to each other, any communication or mating calls, how that was affected by sound pollution, so in terms of traffic, how that may affect their calls. And then even down to things like insects. So I didn't know until I did the research that butterflies in a way can also hear. So I studied into how sound was potentially disrupting them and affecting their lives as well. So it's things like that that I was really fascinated by. So I then did a documentary on that. I had initially pitched an idea to do a documentary on salamanders in New York City. So I was looking at how the city was affecting these groups of salamanders, potentially in terms of their diversity, the gene pool, their numbers, how physical structures were affecting them, if pollution was affecting them, anything like that. So there was some really interesting research behind that. But unfortunately, with the price of going to New York and also the safety for myself to film out there, it was getting more and more complicated. So that's when I had to go for Plan B, my other project. So I finished film school. I had my 2 films. I was very much looking into going into macro filmmaking, macro photography, and for that, I was looking to go to Bristol because that's the natural history hub down there for the BBC. So that was the plan. However, graduation happened to occur just as the start of COVID hit. So at the time, I was living with my boyfriend, and with COVID and everything going on, everything kind of shut down, obviously, and everything was put on pause. So at the time I was living with my boyfriend, and with his job, we could move, but he had that stable job there, and I knew that the career path that I wanted to go down was very temperamental. It'd be much shorter contracts. There might be periods of time where I wouldn't be making money until I got the next contract with the next film or documentary. So my job would have been much more of an unknown. We would have had to move down to Bristol, basically uproot and move our lives there. So it was much more of a risky thing to do that. And then at the time, with the hints of COVID, we were really unsure. So we put a pause on that and stayed put, continue with his career, and I would just take a temporary job at the time there to really then figure out what I wanted to do. Would we be able to potentially do this in the future? Try and get ourselves a little bit more financially stable to be able to do that move. However, because of COVID, obviously it had other ideas, so I then couldn't even get a job because everything closed down. We all went into, isolation, so he was still going for his job, but I pretty much stayed at home for several months because I just graduated and I hadn't been able to apply for a job before COVID really hit. So that was quite a big blow. So I spent several months on my own in a flat when he went out to work, and I have always really struggled with my mental health, and being on my own, seeing everything that was going on in the world was really scary, and I needed things to keep me occupied, and that is where the arts and crafts came back into it. So a very roundabout way of getting back there, but I really started to enjoy doing little crafts just to keep me busy, so kind of upcycling things. I then remember I got my first needle felting kit. I think it was a robin, a little Christmas decoration or something that I think was one of the first things I did. So I started needle felting, and I found it so therapeutic to be able to kind of use a needle just to kind of stab away. So that was one of the things that kept me really calm. And then another thing was macrame. So it's one of the first times that I'd ever done macrame. I always thought macrame was completely stunning. I'd seen it in shops. I'd seen it online, that kind of boho effect I really loved. So it was the first time I had a go at macrame as well. So I was really getting back into my crafts again. After taking such a big time off, kind of focusing more on the film, TV, photography side of things, it gave me enough time to kind of take a breather from arts and crafts and appreciate it again. So I really did value it actually in the end, that it was quite nice to take a little bit of a breather from arts and crafts. So I came back to it more refreshed. At that time, I didn't have anyone telling me, no, you can't do that, or it wasn't good enough. So it was just something for myself to enjoy. So then as everything was beginning to open again, I then applied to one of the large craft retailers in this country. So I was part-time with them as a store colleague, but I did retail before and I very much wanted to focus more on the craft side of things. I really wanted to keep up that kind of creative flair that I had and my love of crafts. So they'd started up an artisan program where we could basically do workshops, do the inspiration in stores, kind of do some extra training and everything like that. And it was very much a program that I wanted to go because I knew I didn't want to go down the kind of store management side of things. I really wanted to go down the line of the artisan route where I could actually be creative, do workshops, get involved with different projects. So that is the direction that I wanted to go in. So I was still working in the same store, but I was now an artisan. So that meant that I could teach the in-store workshops with people. I could have a go at projects that they set. I could also do some lovely extra trainings. So, you know, how to run a small business and stuff like that. Really, really great information and a really good experience there. And then because of COVID, obviously there was much bigger push at the time to be able to do online things because we were in and out of COVID, in and out of lockdowns. So workshops had really picked up to be able to do that online and they were looking to expand the team. So I applied for an online artisan role. So I now currently teach part-time for this craft retailer. So I teach online workshops, which is absolutely amazing. The people that I get to meet on there and the crafts I get to teach is really, really lovely to do. And on the side of that, because of my skills growing, I then decided that I wanted to start my own business. So because I love filming and video making so much, I decided to make how-to videos on YouTube and also little clips on social media. I wanted to do more inspiration, and that's pretty much what I'm doing now. So kind of filming content, making patterns. So it's something that I'm beginning to grow. And also, obviously, this podcast, it's one of those things where I really love what I talk about. If you've been on one of my workshops before, you probably will hear how much I love my crafting. So it's something that I wanted to explore as well. So as I'm growing my online presence, I wanted to also have a go at podcasts and just find a little community that also enjoys crafting, particularly the fibre arts like I do. I wanted to focus mainly on tips and tricks and how-tos for beginners, because a lot of the time with crafting, I always get so nervous trying a new craft, and a lot of the time I get so nervous to the point that I don't want to try it, or I'm worried I'm not doing it right, or if I do try it and I go wrong, I can't figure out where I'm going wrong and how to solve those issues. So with my business, I really wanted to focus on beginners, tips and tricks you might not have heard, really kind of helping anyone getting into it, because I really think that if you can find that craft that you really love, it makes such a difference. And it might take a while to get there. I've tried all sorts of different crafts, and some I really dislike and some I absolutely love. So it might take a little while to find that craft that you absolutely adore. And I just say, go for it. Try it. If you don't like it, that's fine. Move on to the next one. And that's what I want to do with the fibre arts. So for me, very much things like macrame, weaving, needle felting are my areas of expertise. I absolutely love doing it. So that is what I'm going to probably be focusing on most with these podcasts. Those are my kind of 3 areas that I have skills in. But not only that, I'll be looking at different fibre arts as well. So potentially talking down the line to other crafters who have experience in other areas. So things like punch needling, crochet, trying to get their tips and tricks from that to give to you, and their experience and knowledge, potentially how they got into it as well. So I thought this podcast could grow over time. But to start off with, I thought that these episodes could be about how to kind of get started in crafting, particularly in fibre arts, looking at tips, tricks, information, inspiration on there. So hopefully you will find this podcast really, really useful. If not, just a lovely thing to have on the background while you're going about your day, whether you're just crafting, in the garden, whatever it may be. It's quite nice just to be able to have a voice in the background. So that's why I wanted to make this cozy little community going on here. So we are coming to the end of the first podcast episode. If you can, please subscribe to my podcast. I would be so grateful. Additionally, I have a Patreon with different tiered memberships. So please do consider joining the KnotWeaveStitch community, as it really helps keep the podcast alive. I also have an accompanying podcast blog on my website, which is www.giselanartin.com, which follows each episode, so feel free to take a little look at that. Thank you so much for listening to my first episode. It's been terrifying, but hopefully over the weeks I will get into the flow of it, and I really appreciate your support. So I will see you in the next one.